When you travel to a foreign country, whether you are a tourist looking to explore hidden destinations or a foreigner just there to do a job, there is one universal rule of survival you must never break. If the locals look you dead in the eye and tell you that a place is forbidden, you listen. You do not ask questions. You do not go exploring. You simply turn around and walk away. But human curiosity is a dangerous thing. And for one skeptical foreigner in the Middle East, ignoring that exact warning didn't just lead to a bad scare. It led him straight into an ancient buried trap, forcing him to watch helplessly from the inside as a nameless, bloodthirsty demon took total control of his body. Welcome back, dear listeners. You are tuning into the Shadows Prevail. Whether you are listening from right here in the US or joining us from anywhere else around the world, I want to send you all my appreciation and love. I hope everyone is doing great and staying safe. As always, I am back to share another terrifying true horror story with you. Now, we hear a lot of creepy stories happening right here in America, but I always try to bring you guys something different, sourcing unique, terrifying encounters from all over the globe. And I will say this right now, I only bring you 100% true horror stories. If there is ever a slight mistake in a minor detail, please forgive me, but I stand by the absolute truth of these events. I always try to operate on honesty. In fact, if any of these stories turn out to be fake, if anyone out there can actually prove that this is a lie, I will literally match whatever amount of money you donate to your favorite charity every month and give it to them myself. I would never, ever bring you a fake, made-up story. Now, there is one condition. If the people who submitted this story lied to me, then they will have to answer to God for that. That is on them. But honestly, with the massive amount of proof I've seen, I highly doubt any of the stories I share here are fabricated. All right, listeners, let's get into tonight's Horror Night episode. This story basically took place in the United Arab Emirates. Specifically, in a village called Falaiyah, located in the city of Ras Al Khaimah. There is a massive section of this village that has been strictly banned from public entry. Why? Because it's a huge, abandoned date palm orchard. And scattered throughout this orchard, meant to water the palm trees, are several ancient wells. Now, if you've ever visited the Way, Saudi Arabia, or anywhere in the Middle East, you know it is mostly desert, and water scarcity is a massive issue. Because of this, these wells have been bone dry for a very, very long time. There are exactly 7 wells inside this specific orchard. The local Arab residents actually have a name for them. They call them Saba Biar, which translates to the 7 wells. This terrifying incident happened to a gentleman from Indonesia named Iram Kader. He was working there by profession as a welder. The horrifying situation he found himself in was eventually handled by a highly renowned local imam. And the man who assisted the imam in this case was a Pakistani cleric from Karachi named Muhammad Qasim Ali. It was actually Qasim Ali who heard the full details from the imam of Al-Falaiyah village and later passed this story on. So, let's get into the actual events. A massive contracting company won a tender for a huge development project in the Al-Falaiyah village. We are talking about a massive area where multiple large buildings were going to be constructed. Not just one building, a whole complex. Day by day, The Way is building these insane, towering skyscrapers, primarily to entertain tourists. For Americans and Europeans, The Way has become a massive hub for entertainment and vacations. But to build these new structures, the construction zone overlapped right into that abandoned date palm orchard. This meant they had to completely clear out the orchard, cut down all the trees, and wipe the area clean to lay the foundation. Right where they were supposed to build sat those 7 ancient wells, the ones the locals called Saba Biar. They were completely abandoned and entirely useless. When the construction work had just begun, the older veteran workers constantly warned the new guys. They would say, "There is absolutely no reason for us to go deep into that orchard. Let the excavators and the machine operators cut the trees and clear the area. We should just stay out of it and focus on our own work, even." The local Arabs would come by the site to watch the progress, and they would tell the workers, "Are you guys sure you know what you are doing here? It seems like your bosses took on this project without understanding what this place is. There are a lot of problems here. We locals do not usually go in there. People do not wander inside. I have no idea why you guys are working here. But I will pray to the Creator that everything goes smoothly for you." They made it a point to tell the workers not to wander aimlessly inside the date palm orchard without a valid reason. The older workers echoed this to the new guys: "Do not just stroll into the orchard. The locals have forbidden it. Besides, the trees barely produced any dates anyway, which is probably why the owner sold the land for a building tender in the first place." But among the new workers was our guy, Iram Kader, from Indonesia. He had very little belief in the supernatural. During his breaks, he always wanted to sneak into the orchard, but because the older senior workers strictly forbade it, he couldn't go until one day. It was the afternoon, everyone was resting, and the crew was feeling a bit drowsy. Iram, along with 2 or 3 other guys who shared his curiosity, started talking. "Why do they keep forbidding us? What is actually in there? Is there hidden treasure or something? The local Arabs must have some hidden agenda. Come on, let's go take a quick peek." Now, among this small group, there was one slightly older Indian worker who was also curious. So, they snuck inside. They had some free time, so they started exploring. They walked up to the first well and peered inside. It looked exactly like a normal well, completely dried up, nothing out of the ordinary. They went to the second well, looked inside. Same thing. It was broad daylight, and honestly, they didn't see anything unusual at all. It just looked like a standard abandoned date palm orchard. They kept going, passing the wells one by one. But as they passed the 5th well and approached the 6th, the older Indian worker suddenly froze. He stopped in his tracks and said, "No guys, we can't go any further. Let's not go to the 7th well. I am getting a really terrifying feeling about this. We might get into serious trouble. And we came here to work. I don't want to lose my job over this." Since the locals had strictly forbidden entering the orchard, the Indian worker urged everyone to just leave. There was no point in risking danger. They had already checked 6 wells and felt absolutely zero paranormal presence. So, why would one single well be any different? That is exactly what the younger guys thought. What kind of logic is that? We saw 6 of them. Nothing happened. Why would the last one be a problem? what could possibly happen. Even though they heard the Indian workers' warning, their minds were fixated on seeing that seventh well. Now, the group consisted of the Indian worker, some Indonesians and a few Pakistani citizens, and the Pakistani guys who went in there, especially the ones from the mountainous regions of Pakistan. They were incredibly well built, strong, and fearless. Their physical strength was way beyond the average worker. So, trying to scare them with spooky stories didn't really work. When the Indian worker got scared, they initially listened, but they didn't really accept it. They still wanted to see the seventh well. However, since an older worker had made a decision, they couldn't just disobey him. That wouldn't be right, since he was the eldest. He was acting as the leader, or the emir of their group. And showing loyalty to the emir is a very important cultural value for them. So, for the time being, they turned around and came back. But for Iram, his curiosity just multiplied. He became completely obsessed. Later on, Iram approached a veteran worker from Qatar and asked him, "Hey brother, tell me something. Why does everyone forbid us from going in there? I saw it myself. They are just dry wells with some dead leaves inside, that's it. So, what actually happens if someone goes there?" The Qatari man replied in a hushed tone, "Brother, speak softly. Speak slowly. That seventh well, we have always heard it is a well of the jinn. Jinns live inside it. Nobody even looks in that direction. Sure, jinns might be around the other wells too, but that seventh well is incredibly dangerous." When Iram heard this, he burst out laughing. He said, "What kind of superstition is this? You guys are living here in the Arab world, and you are still holding on to 1,000-year-old superstitions? This is like the ancient times of ignorance. Does this stuff even happen? The way has become so advanced, and you guys are still stuck on this." The Qatari gentleman didn't say anything else. He didn't want to drag out the conversation. His perspective was, I warned him, and if he doesn't believe it, that is his problem. If someone intentionally digs their own grave, how can anyone stop them? You can wake a sleeping man, but you cannot wake a man who is only pretending to sleep, right? So, he just stayed quiet. One night, after their shift had ended, all the workers headed back to their designated living quarters. The company had set up these large shipping containers that had been converted into dormitories for the crew to sleep in. Everyone was exhausted and went straight to bed, but Iram and a few of his close buddies who were just as curious as he was decided to stay behind. They used a very small, unfinished concrete pouring job as an excuse to hang around the site. In reality, they were just trying to figure out what they were going to do about that orchard. It was a windy night. The air was heavy, and the entire construction site was dead silent. They finished up the concrete work and sat down together to drink some tea. As they were sipping their tea, Iram suddenly stood up, stepped outside the resting tent all by himself, and started walking. He walked a little distance away, just standing there in the dark, taking a sip of his tea, contemplating whether he should finally just sneak into that orchard alone. He couldn't understand why people were so terrified of a place where he hadn't seen absolutely anything wrong. But as he was standing there lost in thought, he suddenly noticed something lying on the ground, right near his feet. It was a small bundle made of cloth. The fabric looked incredibly old, and it was completely covered in thick dirt and dust, almost blending in with the earth. It looked like this thing had been buried underground for a very, very long time. Curiosity took over. Iram reached down, picked it up, and bravely tried to pry it open. He managed to open it, but the cloth was so ancient and rotten that several parts of it just tore apart in his hands. Inside this bundle, he found a piece of paper. Written on it were 4 lines in Arabic. At first glance, it looked like verses from the Quran. But as he looked closer, he realized it wasn't. The words of the holy verses had been completely scrambled. They were placed side by side in a random, puzzle-like order. Written backward, for anyone who knows about the occult, taking holy verses and twisting them like this is a classic, undeniable sign of dark magic. But that wasn't all. Inside this bundle, there was also a single tooth. There was some strange black ink and a piece of bone, though it was hard to tell if it was an animal bone or a human bone. But the most disturbing part was that this bone was tightly wrapped and tangled in human hair. Iram was examining all these bizarre items. Because the old cloth was hard to hold, he had actually sat down on the dirt to get a better look. He was sifting through the items with his hands, moving them around, trying to figure out what on earth he had just found. You know how it is when you find a weird container. You kind of dig through it with your fingers. That is exactly what he was doing. But suddenly, as he was sitting there touching these cursed objects, he realized the strength in his legs was fading away. A cold, creeping numbness started at his feet, and then slowly began moving up his body. From his legs, it moved to his waist, then up his back, then to his arms. Within seconds, his hands completely froze. He couldn't move them. Then, his mind started to slip. It felt like his brain was shutting down. He had completely lost all physical control over his own body. Suddenly, his body began to shake and convulse violently. He tried to scream out for help, but his vocal cords were completely paralyzed. No sound would come out. And after that, Iram remembers absolutely nothing. The next part of the story comes directly from his co-workers. His buddies were still sitting inside the tent, peacefully drinking their tea, when suddenly they heard a horrifying, blood-curdling sound echoing from the darkness outside. But they knew instantly that was not Iram's voice. It didn't even sound human. Terrified, they rushed out of the tent. They found Iram sitting in the dirt, but his eyes were glowing intensely, almost like they were on fire, and this terrifying demonic guttural growl was ripping through his throat. Seeing this horrific scene, one of his co-workers, a man named Jamil, instantly realized that something deeply sinister had taken hold of Iram. Because whatever was looking at them, whatever voice was coming out of that body, it was not their friend. Jamil immediately started loudly reciting verses from the Quran to protect them. But the moment he started praying, the entity inside Iram actually started laughing. It let out this twisted, furious laugh, glared directly at Jamil, and growled in a voice filled with pure rage. "You called me? You opened my locked door? I am here now, and soon my master will come too." The very second those words left his mouth, Iram's body went completely limp, and he collapsed lifelessly into the dirt. His terrified co-workers rushed over, picked up his unconscious body, and carried him into a small rest tent. They couldn't take him back to the main container dorms because those were strictly for sleeping at night, but they had these smaller tents on site for daytime resting. They laid him down and desperately tried to wake him up. It wasn't until the final hours of the night, right after the Fajr morning call to prayer, that Iram finally regained consciousness. But when he woke up, he was completely mute. He couldn't speak a single word, and he had absolutely no idea what had happened to him. He only found out the horrifying truth when his co-workers explained what they had witnessed. His co-workers immediately suggested that they needed to consult an imam about this. They went straight to their site supervisor and explained the entire terrifying ordeal. The supervisor didn't waste any time. He immediately contacted a local imam. When the imam arrived and heard the details of what happened, he looked deeply concerned. He told them, "Since this problem clearly originated from that abandoned orchard, this is way beyond a standard issue. Dealing with this is the job of a specialized sheikh. Because of the severity of the demonic presence, the local imam didn't want to handle it himself. Instead, he recommended a highly respected Egyptian imam named Sheikh Salim. Sheikh Salim was a Ruqya specialist. Ruqya is the Islamic method of exorcism, and he was known to be an absolute expert in solving severe paranormal and demonic cases. So, they brought Sheikh Salim to the construction site. He sat down, listened to every single detail of the story, and carefully observed Iram. After a few moments, the sheikh looked at him and said, "Iram, purely out of your own arrogance and curiosity, you have brought a massive, terrifying danger upon yourself, and potentially upon everyone else here." Hearing this, a wave of sheer panic washed over all the workers. But then, Sheikh Salim explained a harsh reality. He said, "You guys know the rules and regulations of this country. I cannot just perform a Ruqya exorcism on you without following the proper legal channels. You are all foreigners working here. If you get caught up in some strange incident, and things go wrong, the legal trouble will only multiply. I might try to solve a spiritual problem, but we could end up creating a massive legal disaster with the local authorities." Because of this, Sheikh Salim refused to perform the exorcism without official clearance. Understanding the gravity of the situation, the company supervisor immediately contacted the local police precinct that was in charge of that area. The police arrived at the site, and Sheikh Salim sat down and explained the entire supernatural situation to them. You Noris. Now, it is important to note that in the way, imams and spiritual leaders are highly respected, and the local police officers are very familiar with the concept of Ruqya. They understand that in cases involving black magic and demonic possession, spiritual intervention has to come first before any standard legal action. So, after hearing the details, the police gave Sheikh Salim verbal permission to proceed with the exorcism. But the sheikh didn't start the exorcism right away. He turned to the group and said, "Before I begin this Ruqya on Iram, I need to go to that orchard. I need to go directly to that seventh well and investigate what is actually down there." So, Sheikh Salim prepared to enter the abandoned orchard. He asked two of the local police officers to escort him, but right before they left, the sheikh made a surprising decision. He also asked 3 of Iram's co-workers to come along with them. But Sheikh Salim wasn't going to take any chances. Before anyone took a single step toward that orchard, the sheikh performed a spiritual sealing ritual. He recited powerful prayers, over everyone present, from the police officers to the workers, creating a spiritual shield around their bodies. He did this to ensure that whatever demonic entity was lurking in that orchard couldn't latch on to anyone else and cause them harm. With their spiritual protection in place, the group walked into the date palm orchard. They passed the first well, the second, the third, all the way to the sixth. Finally, they stood in front of the dreaded seventh well. The moment they looked at it, they realized this well was entirely different from the others. The opening of the well wasn't exposed. It was completely sealed off with a heavy lid made of some kind of iron or tin. It was incredibly old, completely rusted over, and the corrosion was so bad that there were literal holes eaten through the metal. Working together, the group managed to pry the heavy rusted lid off the well. They looked inside and realized that this well wasn't actually that deep. It was quite shallow, and resting at the very bottom was an incredibly old, decaying wooden box. Because it wasn't deep, one of the guys easily jumped down into the well and picked up the box. It was surprisingly light. He handed it up to the others, and they carefully opened it. Inside the box, there was no treasure. There was only a thick, ancient ledger book. The pages were filled with extensive Arabic handwriting. It looked like a record book, the kind you would use to document very specific, highly important information and agreements. As they carefully flipped through the fragile pages, they found one specific entry near the end. The date written next to it was from the year 1928. Right next to the date, written boldly in Arabic, was a single name, Mutawakil. But as they looked closer at the pages, they realized what this book actually was. Tucked inside was a very specific document. It looked like a binding contract, but this was not a contract between two humans. It was a literal blood pact. A dark binding agreement made between a human and a jinn. Sheikh Salam gathered the ancient book and the contract, and immediately headed back to where Iram was being kept. When the Sheikh returned, he looked at the group with a very grim expression. He said, "This contract we found, the jinn it was made with, is no ordinary entity. The creature currently residing inside Iram is a terrifying, highly dangerous demon." He explained that these specific jinns reside in the deepest, most desolate parts of the Sahara Desert. We are talking about regions so deep and barren that there isn't a single living creature, let alone a human being, for hundreds of miles. And deep within these dead zones lives a specific, incredibly powerful tribe of demons. They are so well versed in black magic and so physically powerful that there are very few entities on Earth that can even rival them. Dark sorcerers, high-level black magicians, and powerful occultists from around the world actually summon these specific demons by offering them blood sacrifices. These entities do not care about human life. To them, humans are nothing more than meat, literal sacrifices meant for slaughter. Now, occasionally these demons will answer the call of a highly skilled dark sorcerer. They will come to the human world, but they will never submit. They cannot be tamed or fully controlled. The way it works is like a strict business deal. Imagine a man hiring a construction company to build a house. The company does the job, the man pays the agreed price, and then the company leaves. That is exactly how this demonic tribe operates. They refuse to be enslaved by anyone. They make a specific contract with a sorcerer, they take whatever dark payment they demand, They execute the violent task they were summoned for, and then they leave. That is their nature. After explaining the horrifying reality of what they were dealing with, Sheikh Salim prepared himself and officially began the Ruqya exorcism on Iram. The moment the holy words began, the reaction was instantaneous. Within just a few minutes of the Ruqya starting, Iram's throat began to violently spasm. His eyes rolled back and turned a deep, bloodshot red. Before Sheikh Salim could even ask a single question, the demon inside Iram began to speak. It growled. "You looked inside the well, didn't you? I am nothing. I am merely a slave to my master. He will return on the night of the full moon. But he will bring a new body with him." Sheikh Salim narrowed his eyes and demanded, "Who is coming?" The demon inside Iram sneered and replied, "He has no name. He is the Nameless One. He is sleeping beneath the well. He does have a true name, but you are forbidden to speak it. You do not know his name." And that was it. Just those few cryptic, terrifying sentences. Sheikh Salim continued the Ruqya, pushing harder, trying to force the demon to manifest again, trying to interrogate it further. But nothing worked. The entity refused to show itself again. It spoke its warning in Arabic, and then completely retreated deep into Iram's subconscious. Sheikh Salim realized that pushing further right now wasn't going to work. He stopped the ritual and told the group that he would return the next day to continue. But before he left, he gave them a strict warning. "Iram must be watched at all times. Do not let him out of your sight. For the next few days he cannot go outside, and under no circumstances is he allowed to be alone." Following the advice of the police and the sheikh, the company supervisor took immediate action. Right next to the local mosque, there was an empty room. They placed Iram inside that room and literally locked him in from the outside. The only reason they locked him in was for his own safety. They knew that the demon inside him could take control at any moment and force his body to wander back to the orchard, or worse. They had to keep him secured. Until the exorcism was completely finished, they had to follow the sheikh's orders perfectly. That night, Sheikh Salim went into the mosque and began performing several intensive spiritual prayers. He even called his family and told them he wouldn't be coming home that night. He was going to stay inside the mosque until morning. Once inside, he called for Muhammad Qasim Ali. Now, Qasim Ali wasn't the main head imam of the mosque, but he was a cleric who occasionally led the daily prayers. The sheikh also called for the man who worked as the cleaner for the mosque. He looked at both of them and said, "I will be staying inside the main hall of the mosque tonight. I need you to know that I am in there. I will be engaging in a very specific, highly sensitive, spiritual task. I will lock the doors from the inside, and you must not disturb me under any circumstances. But I need both of you to stay here on the mosque grounds tonight. Just stay close by." Once they agreed, Sheikh Salim locked himself inside. He laid out his prayer mat and performed 2 units of Islamic prayer. Then, he did something extraordinary. He summoned 2 specific jinns that he personally knew. He commanded them to go to the orchard and investigate. He needed to know exactly why Iram had been targeted, and he needed to know the identity of the nameless demon the possessed boy had spoken about. He needed to know exactly what he was up against. Now, It is very important to understand that these two jinns Sheikh Salim summoned were not enslaved demons. They were actually his students. They were benevolent entities who came to the Sheikh to learn about spiritual matters. A short time later, the two Dian students returned from the orchard, and the information they brought back to the Sheikh was absolutely chilling. They told him that residing inside that date palm orchard was another jinn. But this one was incredibly old and very peaceful. He never harmed humans, in fact. He often tried to help them from the shadows. This elderly jinn had lived there long enough to witness exactly what had happened decades ago, and he provided the missing pieces to the puzzle. He revealed that many years ago, a dark sorcerer had come to this exact area. His name was Mutawakil. This sorcerer belonged to the infamous Tambari tribe, a tribe located deep within the Sahara region of Africa. Even today, the descendants of the Tambari tribe are notoriously feared for their mastery over the darkest forms of black magic and demonic worship. Mutawakil had traveled to this village with one terrifying goal in mind: to summon, bind, and enslave an incredibly dangerous, blood-drinking demon. On the night of a full moon, Mutawakil went to the seventh well in the orchard. There he committed the ultimate dark act. He sacrificed a human being. He offered the victim's blood as a tribute to the darkness. Then, he took a piece of a broken mirror and buried it deep in the dirt near the well. Over this mirror, he chanted 3 specific verses from the Quran. But the words were scrambled and twisted, acting as a dark, corrupted magnet. Through this ritual, he called out to a nameless demon. He didn't know the entity's true name. He just chanted into the void, commanding whatever was listening to come to him. His relentless, dark summoning eventually tore a hole into the spiritual realm, and a horrifying demon answered the call. A demon whose primary source of sustenance was human blood. The moment the demon crossed over, Mutawakil trapped it. Using the well as a focal point, he created an invisible, magical doorway and locked the demon inside, and then he forced the entity into a binding contract. The curse he placed on the buried mirror was simple, but deadly. If any human ever looked into that specific piece of broken glass and saw their own reflection 3 times, the trapped demon would instantly be granted the right to take over their body. It didn't matter if they looked 3 separate times, or just stared long enough for it to count as 3. The moment the condition was met, the demon would possess them. That was the only way the entity could ever experience a physical body. But why did Mutawakil do this? Why trap such a monstrous entity? In the twisted world of the Tambari tribe, binding a powerful demon is the ultimate status symbol. It is a pure display of dominance. The more dangerous the demon you can enslave, the greater your power is perceived to be. Mutawakil didn't even care about forcing the demon to do chores or tasks for him. Just the act of keeping it chained in that well was enough to prove his immense magical strength. However, Mutawakil had a secondary, much darker motive. He didn't just want a trophy. He wanted to use this incredibly powerful demon as a gateway, a spiritual bridge, to establish direct communication with Lucifer himself. He believed that by holding this high-ranking demon hostage, he could figure out a way to open a door that would allow him to meet the devil face to face. Because of this twisted ambition, the seventh well didn't just become a trap. It became a literal stronghold for demonic energy. Eventually, time caught up with Mutawakil. He was ultimately killed, and ironically, he was murdered by one of his own summoned entities. How exactly he died, or why his own creation turned on him, remains a mystery. The elderly jinn didn't have the details of his death, and the sheikh couldn't find out more. But what the sheikh did find out was how to break the curse. The demon inside Iram right now wasn't even the main nameless demon. The main entity was still trapped beneath the well. The thing currently possessing Iram was a lesser subordinate that had managed to slip through the cracks. The Sheikh's jinn students taught him the exact method needed to break this specific Tambari curse. They explained the precise ruqya techniques required. Because dark magic varies heavily depending on where it comes from, and Egyptian magic is very different from African Sahara magic, the method of exorcism has to perfectly match the type of curse. Using the wrong ruqya could be completely useless, or even make it worse. Armed with this new critical knowledge, Sheikh Salim finally knew exactly what he had to do. He left the mosque and immediately headed to the locked room to see Iram, preparing for the final exorcism. Iram was still locked securely inside the room next to the mosque. Sheikh Salim walked in, took his position, and began the specialized ruqya treatment. Almost instantly, the reaction was violent. Iram's body began to convulse so aggressively that it looked like he was being ripped apart from the inside. His limbs were jerking and thrashing with such unnatural force that the people watching were terrified. It genuinely looked like his bones were going to snap under the sheer physical stress. No human body is meant to endure that kind of violent, erratic movement. Realizing that this demon was not going to give up easily, Sheikh Salim made a final, decisive call. Doing this inside a room wasn't going to work. That very same night, Sheikh Salim, along with Iram's co-workers, the 2 armed police officers, and 2 other imams, including Qasim Ali, grabbed Iram and dragged him all the way back to the abandoned orchard. They marched him straight up to the 7th well. They were going to end this right at the source. Sheikh Salim instructed the 2 other imams to stand near the well. He told them to start reciting Surah al-Baqarah. In the Islamic faith, this specific chapter of the Quran is known to be incredibly powerful. It is the ultimate weapon used to burn and banish demonic entities. The Sheikh told them to recite it as loudly and powerfully as they possibly could. But before the final ruqya could officially begin, the Sheikh knew the physical barrier had to be destroyed. Following his instructions, the men completely smashed and tore apart the rusted metal lid that was covering the 7th well. The moment the well was completely exposed, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew thick and heavy. And then, an invisible booming voice echoed from the thin air around them. The voice roared, "My master will return. My master will return. Your destruction is inevitable. Do you really think this mirror is the only way my master can escape? There are other paths. He will break free. I am leaving this boy for now. But remember this, many more like him will come to this place, and through them, my master will return." Meanwhile, Iram's body was shaking uncontrollably. He was trembling so violently his clothes were completely soaked in sweat, sticking to his skin. The physical toll on his body was immense. But the ruqya was working. The exorcism was successful. The sheikh ordered the cursed mirror to be completely shattered into pieces. Once it was destroyed, the broken shards of glass were thrown directly down into the dark abyss of the seventh well. The exact second the glass hit the bottom, a horrifying, deafening roar erupted from deep inside the earth. The sound of a massive, ancient creature screaming in pure rage echoed up from the well. As the roar shook the ground, Iram let out a blood-curdling scream of his own, and then his body went completely limp. He collapsed face first into the dirt, entirely unconscious. And then, absolute, dead silence fell over the orchard. The group picked up Iram and carried him back to the mosque. A short time later, the call for the Fajr morning prayer echoed through the air. Everyone washed up and performed their morning prayers. When Iram finally woke up, he was completely cured. The demonic entity was gone, and he was fully back to his normal self because 2 active police officers had been present and witnessed the entire supernatural event with their own eyes. They fully understood the gravity of the situation. They immediately filed a formal report with their precinct. Shortly after the report was filed, the authorities sent a team to the orchard. They completely sealed off the 7th well. They filled it, capped it, and locked it down permanently. To this day, there are rumors that strange smoke occasionally seeps out of that sealed well. The official cover story given to the construction workers and the public is that there is a toxic gas leak coming from underground, which is why the well had to be sealed off. If anyone asks why they can't go near it, they are simply told, "It is a gas leak, it is dangerous." But the locals? They know exactly what is down there. It is not gas. It is the sealed lair of an ancient, bloodthirsty demon. What the true name of that demon is, how exactly Mutawakkil managed to bind it, what its ultimate purpose was, and why the subordinate demon was screaming those cryptic warnings, all of those questions remain a mystery. But that well remains sealed to this day, and occasionally, that strange smoke still rises from the concrete. If you are listening to this right now, and you happen to live or work in the Falaiyah village of Ras Al Khaimah, if you ever come across these 7 wells, I strongly urge you, do not go near them. Things like this never end well. Human curiosity about the dark and the unknown almost always leads to disaster. There are places in this world that are literal strongholds for demonic entities. If you trespass into their territory, you will face the consequences. And as for that nameless demon, who knows? It definitely has a name. It clearly worships Lucifer, considering the dark rituals used to summon it. But just how powerful is it? Is it still trapped down there in the dark? Or is it slowly finding another way out? Nobody knows. And honestly, nobody is trying to find out. Because if someone tries to investigate and accidentally breaks the seal, if that ancient demon is finally set free, the devastation it could cause would be catastrophic. That is exactly why the authorities sealed the area and walked away. Look guys, the moral of the story is this. Confidence is great, but overconfidence can get you killed. Whether it is an ancient jinn in the Middle East or a skinwalker lurking in the woods right here in the US, if you see something you shouldn't, or you feel that sudden dread in your gut, turn around and walk away. Do not mess with things you do not understand. Alright guys, that is going to wrap up tonight's episode. I really hope this story gave you the chills. If you're new to the Shadows Prevail, do me a massive favor and smash that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notification so you never miss an upload. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like and share it with your friends who love true horror stories. It really helps the channel grow and gets these true stories out there. Also, if you have a true scary story of your own, whether you want to type it out or send a voice recording, you can submit it to my email address linked in the description. I'm always looking for real, terrifying encounters to share with you guys. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the very end. Stay safe out there, take care of yourselves, and good night.